Hi, folks. Welcome to Monday's edition of the iWrite Radio podcast. I've got Stuart Lockhead with me today. Hi, Stuart.
How are you doing?
I'm Norrie Stewart. We're not sure if Jimmy will be able to join us, Jimmy Hutton. He'll jump in if he can, I would think. Today, we're going to cover the press conference. I don't think it'll be a hugely long time on that, but I think we need to talk about Brexit. And I apologize because obviously 29 deadlines ago.
Boo, boo, don't mention Brexit, but yeah, right, we can't avoid it.
Well, as I say, 29 deadlines ago, I thought it was all finished. Shows you what I know. The press conference today with Nicola Sturgeon, or the coronavirus briefing, as I think is her preferred description, was the usual. I have to say, care homes. Nobody seems to be able to understand that you can't just nip in and get your vial of vaccine, stick in your pocket, nip back to the care home and inject somebody. I mean, they need permission to move it because of the way it has to be stored, etc.
You don't just get an ice pack and wrap it in an ice pack and stick it in your pocket.
Some of the shots I've seen, they're using dry ice to pack it. But I'm really, really struck about the way our journalists, they're not inquiring into anything. They're looking to get articles that appear to already have been written to justify printing them. I mean, nobody has said to Jean Freeman, who was there today, for instance, I wonder if the health secretary could run through the steps so people could understand how complicated it is.
You know, in a reasonable world, Norrie, the journalist from the Mail would have been barred today on grounds of decency. The indecent front page of the Sunday Mail, the Mail on Sunday, as it's properly called, from London. I mean, the idea that Merkel is making Britain crawl over broken glass to get a deal is absolutely disgusting.
I can't think of a time when so much information has been ignored, available to our journalists and been ignored. I mean, they seem incapable of going to the government website and looking at it. And if they do, they ignore it. You know, I mean, they know that decisions are made and published on a Tuesday about levels, and they insist every Monday on asking her to tell them first. You know, I mean, it's a complete waste of breath. I would think that probably a third of the questions were questions they knew weren't getting answered.
I mean, it was what was it? Friday's show, we were talking, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And there were questions like that again. The questions about Christmas. You'll be, there'll be one journalist be saying, well, have you thought again about the Christmas break, and perhaps you might reconsider that? And then another one saying, how are you going to feel if there's a third wave after Christmas break?
Yeah, and 1 week ago they were all insisting that she would have to change the rules for Christmas. It must be great. It really must be great. Never having to take responsibility. I mean, we sit here and pontificate day in, day out. And there is always part of me that thinks, well, I need to watch what I say here. I can be black and white about this, but the reality is not black and white. It's complicated.
Right.
Here's Mr. Hutton.
Hello there.
Jimmy, your taxi's on fire.
Fire, yeah.
It's me. It's me that's on fire.
Shocking.
It's fairly impressive, it was. I thought you had a smoke machine going.
I think the sun's sitting over my right shoulder, Stuart. It probably added beautifully to the effect.
Yes, it's a very nice effect. Oh, and you've even got a rainbow. Do you know that?
I take it this is you on your smoke break then?
Yes, I've just dropped somebody off, and I'm picking them up again in about an hour, mate. I thought that worked out about perfect.
Oh, that'll work out quite nicely. Good stuff. Well, we're going to cover a piece that Stuart found George Monbiot about. We've got about a 6-minute clip that's new to me, and I think it'll be new to you. Did you watch it?
I've not seen it. I've probably seen it before, mate. I think it's been about a couple of days.
Yeah, it's quite sums up the Brexit situation quite neatly. Don't think you're going to fall out with it much, Jimmy. But it sets up the scene for us to talk about Brexit for a change. It's not as though we've got nothing new about Brexit.
And of course, we're at the moment we're on the subject of the what do you call it? The coronavirus briefing.
Yes, damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Which
it's your opportunity to tell us what you think about. Did you catch any of the briefing? I saw you.
I watched the start of it, but it was so destroying. I thought, geez, they're just ramping up the fear again this week.
You don't think it's going to change the Edinburgh situation tomorrow?
No, the numbers have went up just enough for it to be able to justify being a whole again.
It's not funny, that man.
I'm sorry.
It's costing our man money.
What I find strange about it is nobody in their right mind is going to lower the level you're in if your numbers are going up.
No, although given that we should be in level 2 anyway at those numbers, the fact that it's gone up slightly from a very low base, we're still around about half of the level that we should be for the lower threshold to be in tier 3.
Well, I mean, just to tease you a bit more, I think I heard a journalist quoting a released briefing document in which they said there was a recommendation that level 1 was a possibility, which I thought was I must have gone like that with my ear, you know.
But I mean, but that's kind of the thing that annoys me about them. There are, I think, 4 different things they look at that have statistics backing them up. But then they have to go, now, wait a minute, what's actually going to happen? They have to try and predict what the result of taking Edinburgh down to level 2 would be.
Yeah, and they absolutely use hyperbole to do so.
Well, to justify where they come to. But I mean, I'm quite sure that what figures hugely in their calculation is an influx of people shopping for Christmas.
Yeah, but they won't admit that. That's happening anyway, Nori. As I said on Sunday, you couldn't get a car parked. Even here, probably, I'm sitting down at Inverleith now. Here was probably ramped because town centre was heaving. But what they're worried about, genuinely worried about, is people travelling. But they didn't admit that.
So what?
Nicola's at pains to say she trusts the public to adhere to the regulations, even though they're not adhering to the regulations. But what they're really worried about is people coming in here and having a piss up. So they're not going to open the pub.
So, well, what we need to do is go, right, the 13th of December, our roving reporter in his black studio noticed that Edinburgh was rammed.
It was heaving, and there's not a chance all those vehicles came from within the city of Edinburgh.
But what I'm saying is what we need to do is keep that date in our heads, and 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, look at the numbers.
There was one accusation. There was one accusation. I will assume it was one of our esteemed journalists today. That they claimed that some of the data proved that there was transmission amongst secondary school pupils, and why weren't they closing them early for Christmas? Because the school kids will be just playing games and not getting any teaching done.
Well, it's interesting that London have started that now. They've started closing their schools and going to blended learning, remote learning. Well, so London are perfectly happy to accept that there is transmission within schools, and they've seen some serious spikes apparently in some of their schools in kids between the ages of 10 and 18. But at the moment, the Scottish line still seems to be that it doesn't transmit in school, and if kids catch it, they're catching it out with the school environment.
Well, the line that sticks out to me is that schools are the most important thing. I mean, it's not actually going to matter. From the point of view of the press informing people, that's just not what it's about. It's about finding ways to attack the Scottish government. And if the Scottish government close schools and go to blended learning, howls of rage.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, in fact, can they legally do it? Now, there's a question.
Well,
because in England, they can't legally do it.
Well, they are doing it, mate. Greenwich Borough Council has instructed their schools that today is the last day of schooling for the year.
Well, Eton's closed because they don't want their pupils to have to self-isolate before
but that's not really a school, is it? It's a fud factory.
Well, the point I'm making here is, and apparently you cannot just close schools the way they've closed Eton. I would imagine you need to have a high caseload of the coronavirus to justify it.
I'm trying to figure out why you brought it up, Eton, Norrie.
Because there's one rule for them
right.
and a different rule for everybody else.
Right, okay.
Greenwich have done it. They're the first London borough to instruct schools to close tomorrow. They've no waited for permission from the government. They've no waited for permission from the London Mayor. They've just gone and done it. So
well, if the information I'm getting is true, they've broken the law.
Why is it? They do have much more. They work to. There is an English curriculum which they teach to right across all, public schools.
Why but they're still under the local education authorities. Greenwich Borough Council have chosen to do this. Well, presumably they think that they have the power to do so.
They probably have the public health regulations. The power.
Well, that's kind of my point. I think if you can justify it through the number of cases in schools, you probably can do it.
Because my father was he was an environmental health officer, and he worked in Glasgow through during the war, right through a smallpox epidemic. And that would be, I can remember him talking about it at the time. That was very, very much local authority control.
I think we can expect to see the commander of the Misterons on the Scottish news tonight. Larry Flanagan will make his reappearance.
Well, your other friend, the guy from the care home sector, Donald, what's his name? He's a Mac. The private care home sector.
The boy with the red Holdsworth glasses.
Oh, the big boy whose line is "A big boy done it and run away."
Not the fancy fellow, no, not the fellow that owns them, but just
it's the guy with the beard.
Aye, the guy that. Anyway, he was on because they were talking about care homes, and why weren't well? Somebody's brought up. Oh, England is already putting jabs into 80-year-olds. Have you started in Scotland yet? Oh no, but we've actually started the care homes in Scotland yet. Have they started in England yet?
But England are doing exactly what we're doing. They're giving injections to people who can get to hospital to get the injection.
Not according to the journalists.
Oh right.
Well, there's some differentiation again. I believe that we're they now have the authority to pack it down, to take it to care homes. It's now just about the logistics of doing that.
Well, apparently they're starting today.
And apparently we'll be starting at the end of the week or so.
No, apparently we're starting today.
Oh, right, charge on.
Took them a week to get permission to do it, and it's got to be done by an NHS nurse.
It's got to be an NHS employee. It's not enough to be a registered nurse. You've got to be actually
an NHS nurse. Yeah.
Well, I didn't have a problem with that because the care homes are wanting their staff to do it, and frankly, the way that the care home staff have been put upon during this entire thing, if I'd rather the NHS staff just get on and do the vaccinations and let the care home staff get on with the rest of their duties.
Yeah, Yes, I think you're probably right. Can we move off this and on to Brexit?
Yes,
What
the
now?
sooner the better. Well, you've got to allow me to mention George Foulkes' name come up.
Oh, yes.
I was wondering why Paul Hutcheon, who's now a very senior reporter, because he's the political man at the Record, I was thinking, why is Paul Hutcheon turned up at the presser? It's normally a junior top. And so he brought up George Foulkes. Apparently George Foulkes, isn't he happy? He's still not happy about these press briefings.
Well,
But yes, let's move on.
This must be the second letter George Foulkes has written to Ofcom, because months ago he wrote one, did he not, with Jackie Bailey?
I'm not even
Aye.
sure if it's a new letter. It's probably just Paul Hutcheon brought it up again because he can.
Stumbled
Nah, I
over
think
them.
I seen it. It was reported, I think, in the Times this morning as well. Obviously, Lord Pissybreeks has woke up and decided that he better do something to justify his 1,500 quid a week. So,
Well, yes, yeah, and he's right, because what the Labour Party really needs is Richard Leonard on the telly every day, showing them showing
absolutely.
everybody what a bunch of arseholes they really are. Still,
Well,
there we go.
if they can get him on the telly every day, they could go for an absolute record and get into single figures, 9% or something like that.
Okay, we're gonna move on to Brexit now. Stuart passed me a clip of George Monbiot.
Monbiot, I think.
Monbiot, sorry.
Yeah. He's a well-known left-wing commentator. He specialises in the environment, but he sums up the situation about Brexit very well in this clip. So, and it's not too long. I think it's about 6 minutes.
Have you got it there, Stuart, or do you want me to do it?
Well, I thought you had it there, so I just left you to it.
No, cool.
I might take notes.
This is going to get complicated for me. Give me a sec.
I sad to hear. If you're ready to go, I'll shut up.
Forms of capitalism.
Have-
One you could describe as house-trained capitalism. This is
Yeah, that's the one, but just waiting to see it.
Right, sorry about this, folks. It's a bit of a guddle.
Sun's still shining in Jimmy's studio. There you go. That looks Bobby.
You got it.
The only way really to understand Brexit is as the outcome of a
You
civil
turn it up.
war within capitalism. There are two dominant forms of capitalism.
Can you hear it?
One you could describe as house-trained capitalism. This is corporations,
quiet.
rich people who are prepared to more or less go along with democracy, as long as democracy doesn't get out of hand and actually represent the interests of the people, but as long as it's a sort of thin and narrow form of democracy, they'll go with it. What they want is stability. They want regulations which protect their market position from rougher and dirtier companies who would otherwise wipe them out. They're happy
Gangsters.
with the administrative state. And then there's another faction who could be described as capitalism's warlords. These are people who don't want any constraints in their way at all. They see taxation as illegitimate. They see regulation as illegitimate. In their unguarded moments, they reveal that they see democracy as illegitimate. People such as Peter Thiel, the guy who founded PayPal, says actually democracy and market freedom are incompatible. The conflict should be resolved in favor of this thing he calls the market. The market is a euphemism for the power of money. And they believe that that power should be unmediated, that it should be able to do whatever it wants without anyone standing in its way. And they see as their enemy house-trained capitalism. And this is really where the power lies within the whole Brexit debate, is on the one side, the august institutions of capitalism, like the Confederation of British Industry, saying this is terrible, we don't want this to happen at all. And on the other side, the oligarchs from the city, very powerful people who are funding dark money think tanks and other lobby groups, saying we want to clear it all out of the way. In Steve Bannon's words, we want the deconstruction of the administrative state. And it's a second group, the warlords of money, who have won. everyone from American billionaires to Russian oligarchs poured money into the Leave campaign. What they see the UK as a beachhead within the richest and most powerful nations. It's all very well capturing Chile, as they did with the Pinochet coup, which overthrew the democratically elected government and installed a dictatorship there in the 1970s, or capturing Indonesia, as they did with Suharto's coup in the 1960s. But capturing a country like the UK, without the need for a military coup, well, that's a much bigger prize. A country which has a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, a country with enormous financial and international clout. And if you can turn that into a country which dances to the tune of warlord capitalism, rather than of house-trained capitalism, well, that is a fantastic victory. The way Brexit was pitched to us was that it was all about foreigners and Europe and culture wars, trying to establish ourselves as an independent nation. And this view of what Brexit was about was fronted up by people like Nigel Farage. That's just a smokescreen. Farage and his ilk are just tools of something much bigger and much deeper than they are. But unfortunately, this smokescreen is all that the media has chosen to see. In the case of the billionaire press, that's by design. They don't want us to see that this is an attempt by the warlords of capitalism to overthrow domesticated capitalism. In the case of the BBC, it's by default. They just can't see through the smokescreen to the maneuvers behind it. What happens to us, to the citizens of the UK, is of very little interest. We're just the grass that gets trampled in this civil war. Now, there's no doubt at all where the British government comes down, which side it comes down on. There was this extraordinary moment, a moment which no one would ever have expected to see, of the leader of the Conservative Party, Boris Johnson, saying, "Fuck business." He was talking about house-trained business. He is effectively being put into power by warlord capitalism, by the people who want to do away with the administrative state. And that's his role. That's the role of his government. It's the role of the whole number 10 apparatus. It's the role of his cabinet. And when people thought that the sacking of Dominic Cummings would bring an end to that idea, they were completely deluded. It's not about Dominic Cummings. It's about a much bigger apparatus, a much bigger infrastructure of power that extends beyond government into the dark money think tanks and the other lobby groups, which are in turn funded by these very powerful oligarchs, not just within the UK, but internationally. I see myself as a Eurosceptic Remainer. I'm no enthusiast for the European Union because I see it just as a bastion of another kind of capitalism, a bastion of domesticated capitalism, which is in a quiet war with democracy. And what we need is neither form of capitalism. We need a political economy which is good for the people who live today, the people of future generations, good for the rest of the living world, and is actually governed by the people themselves, not by this kind of capitalism or that kind of capitalism, these corporations or those oligarchs. A democracy which responds to people not just once every 4 or 5 years, but every day, when we have participation as well as representation. We need a system that transcends both of these warring factions and puts the people in charge.
There you are then, lads.
Well, he didn't waste many words, did he? It sums it all up.
Just as well, he's a good writer.
So
I think that's everything that's wrong with the left in this country for the last 40 years.
What's that then?
Well, he's sitting babbling on about different types of capitalists and how it's going to. People in this country are worried about how it's going to affect them, how they're going to be queuing for food, how they're not going to have jobs. They didn't need another lefty lecturing them about what they should have done. They need somebody telling them actual actions that they can take to mitigate this utter disaster.
Right, well, are you talking about street action?
No, I'm not talking about street action. I'm talking about bloody finding ways to, well, for Scotland, getting out of the UK altogether. England's buggered. They voted for this. England absolutely opened their legs and said, come on, give it to me, big boy, when Boris stood for government. So they're going to get shafted, big style. We have an option not to by walking away. But as I say, he's a great thinker, but he spends his time thinking about the minutiae of what this is rather than what it's doing to people. And then, frankly, the entire Labour Party have done the exact same thing for the last 10 years. They've come up with nothing, absolutely nothing, that can in any way counter the fact that the Tories have been in power for 10 years and still managed to thump them in an election last year.
I think you've just focused on the last 2 minutes. I think his description, rather than his prescription, was pretty accurate.
But Stuart, who cares about it?
Well, it matters to understand.
Nobody gives a damn about what's the description or the prescription. They've won. The capitalists have won. And the left has no answer to that and has had no answer to it. And I mean, they won in 2016.
Yeah, but
We're 4 years later and they've still got no answer to
You're
it.
still ranting about his prescription right at the very end. Are you saying that his description of what's actually happened is inaccurate?
Who cares about his description of what's happened?
It matters, Jimmy, to
It
understand
doesn't matter
what's
a fuck,
gone.
Stuart.
Oh, yes,
How does
of course
matter?
it does.
People are losing their jobs and their livelihoods, and you're praising his prose about how he's spotted the problem. The problem's been there for years, and he's, frankly, as I say, it's just as well as a good writer because he's taken no actions to do anything about it, other than writing right-on columns.
So if you're not, all right, so what do you think should happen then?
Well, frankly, as I say, Scotland needs to get the hell out of Dodge. England.
Well, that's an easy way to put it, that's for sure. We don't even have an SNP that seems to be very keen on getting out of the union at the moment.
No, because the SNP are politicians as well, mate. The whole political class, they've been navel-gazing over Brexit for the 10 years before it happened and the 4 years since it happened.
There's a very strong case to criticise the whole Brexit strategy undertaken by Nicola Sturgeon's government.
I always like, I mean, when you get to this and you look at what's been done or what was attempted to be done, I always think it's quite smart to look at where we would have been had they done the exact opposite. So Wings has an argument that the SNP had the opportunity to blackmail May into giving us a referendum by agreeing to support her deal. And his argument is because of where we are now, it would have made no difference, the SNP, had they got her to agree to a referendum. I don't think she would ever have agreed to a referendum. So I think it's a moot point. I'd
agree with that. She could never have got her soft Brexit through by using SNP votes, because for every SNP vote she'd have lost 2 Tory votes.
Well, I mean, I think it's, but the point I'm making here is George Monbiot, how do you pronounce his son? Monbiot. Right. I mean, it might well be the case, but I kind of agree with Jimmy on this one. What's the point?
What's the point of understanding what you're really facing?
No, what's the point of nobody's going to believe him. Nobody believes, like in the general public, that there is a conspiracy by a bunch of rich people to do away with democracy. Oh, no, nobody believes that, because our press, who may well be weapons of this group of people, I don't believe it. I'm sorry, I don't believe these buccaneering.
We know why the English voted for leave. They voted for leave because they were frightened of foreigners.
Right, okay, and you know this how?
Oh, good, okay.
Well, so Stuart, you made a statement there that I've never seen proof of. I've never actually heard anybody come out. No, I've heard nobody on live television being interviewed saying, I'm a racist. That's why I voted for Brexit.
I'm sorry, the evidence is out there. A lot of analysis was done, and people voted because they were frightened. They voted over the main issue that people voted to leave for was immigration. And that was
Well,
the main issue
I
in their
didn't vote
face.
against Brexit because I'm not a racist. I voted against Brexit because I thought it'd be an economic disaster. So why should I believe that the majority of people that voted for Brexit are racist?
Right, but let's not move on too fast on the topic of Brexit without bringing up Fintan O'Toole's very snappy summary of the situation, because I first raised it and shared it 2 or 3 days ago, and it's been coming back at me from all directions. It's been widely shared all over the place, and he summed it up quite simply, that Britain joined the original common market at the early 1970s because we were a rule-taking country, because the common market was making the rules. It was the major market. They were making the rules and we weren't in it. So we thought we'd better join because we have to follow these rules anyway because the market's so big. And so we joined. Now we're leaving it and we will end up a country as a rule taker again and not being part of making the decisions.
Well, that's not a bolt of lightning to me, Stuart.
No, of course it's not, and it's
We've
not a
been
bolt of
talking
lightning to
about
me either. But it'd be a bolt of lightning to 90% of the people of this country that don't get the information because of the media we've got. As far as they're concerned, the Germans are evil, the French are evil. That's why they sent the gunboats out to board fishing boats.
Fintan O'Toole's position has always been it's been about English exceptionalism. Now, I'm prepared to accept that, but
wasn't about. I didn't mention the English exceptionalism.
No, but that's been if you read Fintan O'Toole, his position is that Brexit is about English exceptionalism.
That's another case.
Well, but that's always been his case. So I'm prepared to accept that, and I'm certainly prepared to accept that the vast majority of people that voted for Brexit genuinely believed it would give them more power as individuals and as Britain as a country, but they're wrong, and I never thought they would do.
We become rule takers. Think about every product you
Nobody's
buy.
arguing with you, Stuart.
Sorry, right, but virtually every product you buy has got a CE mark on it. Doesn't matter where in the world it's sold, it's got a CE mark on it, because that is the most powerful market in the world, and therefore people manufacture their product to fit European standards. And you have to, even if you live in Brazil, I bet you get a CE mark on it.
Yeah, and nobody here is going to disagree with that.
Will we get a CC mark in a few years' time when the European market is the second largest market in the world, when the Chinese and the Australians and New Zealanders and all that have all got their act together and actually got their market set up?
Could be.
I think both of you are right. Norrie in particular is right with the exceptionalism thing. But the English people are congenitally racist in that they consider themselves better than the rest of Europe. They have nicknames for every major country in Europe, and they've got caricatures of how they think these people are. We're mean. The Spanish, the Italians are lazy. The French are surrender monkeys. But the reality is they voted for Brexit because they thought it would make their lives better, because politicians lied to them and told them that it would make their lives better.
The Germans have no sense of humor, but are incredibly efficient.
Yeah. And desperately need to sell their BMWs and Mercedes to Joe Bloggs and Joe Bloggs' missus in England because they can't sell them in the rest of the planet. Seriously.
What I find really funny about that argument is that driving a German car in the future is going to be an even bigger status symbol, because you'll have had to pay 20% more tax on it.
There's going to be a nice healthy tariff wrapped around that German car that your average punter doing south will pay anyway.
Why is the most popular song in America about a Mercedes Benz and not any other make?
Because it's got status.
It's got status, and that was 30 years ago.
German efficiency.
I did
It's a
own one
Vorsprung
Mercedes.
duck technique.
Yes, I did own one Mercedes. And it could do 80 miles uphill, even with a big end gone.
So we are now at the point where we're not going to get a deal, but we're going to keep negotiating forever.
Aye, we're going to get some kind of cobbled together nonsense that they'll call a deal, but it'll actually be as close to no deal as I'll have a fag paper between no deal and the deal that we get.
The one thing that the EU will not allow us to have is full access to their market without membership. Otherwise, the EU will fall apart if they give that.
But Stuart, the problem is Boris Johnson still thinks that he can get that. He genuinely still feels that.
You really think so?
Aye, I do. I genuinely think the English are that arrogant that they feel that the story that they've made up, this entire story that they've made up, that the Europeans at the last minute will cave in to have England as part of their market. I still think they believe that that's the case.
They don't
That
understand.
they're going to get.
It's
They've
a
never
lie.
They've never understood Europe, mate. The English never will understand the European, because the Europeans, since the end of the Second World War, have all been about peaceful coexistence. And England doesn't want to peacefully coexist with anybody. They want to rule everybody. They always have and they always will.
I think the British government is making the mistake of looking at Europe as it was when it was individual countries and Britain had more power.
But look at Boris trying to get bloody phone calls with Macron and Merkel the other day. The English absolutely being black affronted that they're not going to take the calls. No,
but that
to negotiators like you've been told for the last 4 years.
That's the point I'm making. I think the British government looked on Europe like it was a European country, not 27 European countries, and forgot that 27 countries are a lot more powerful than one country.
Particularly when they decide, you know what, we are working as one. That's our negotiating team, and you are not. Because they knew that the last gambit of the mad Englishmen would be to try to hive off the French or the Germans or even the Italians or the Spanish, whoever. I mean, I don't know who we're going to be calling next. You know what I mean? Are we going to call Lithuania and Latvia and try and hive them off?
I wish him luck with hiving off the French.
I think all they've got left is possibly Hungary or maybe even Poland. But they're their friends now, aren't they?
Wouldn't it be fantastic if we were looking to somebody like Viktor Orban to solve our problems for us?
Well, it's Russians. They do say it's the Russian money in London that's backing the Tory party these days. Well, and it's Russians that backing Hungary.
I don't think so, mate. I think it's the old money. Your Christian Odies and that have nothing to do with Russian money.
Well, going back to Brexit, I believe there's now going to be a fight over all these European companies that have bought up British fishing rights.
Yeah.
Apparently somebody's thrown that one on the table, that Britain expects these rights to come back to them.
And if I was that Dutch company that had that absolutely massive trawler that takes about 25% of Britain's entire fish quota per year, I would be holding whoever sold me that quota absolutely bang to the contract, and I would have them in the High Court in about 5 minutes if they try to renege on the deal that they signed.
Well, I would imagine that these contracts were written under European law, so they might well end up in European courts.
I'd take them to the High Court first, mate, because even if they are written under European law, the High Court's going to uphold a contract. Contract law is international these days, isn't it?
Well, when you think it's a Dutch company and you think it's it's something to do with the sea, it's something to do with European law, and it's something to do with capitalism. And think about Holland, the international courts in Holland. They invented capitalism, and they're the biggest sea operator in Europe.
Like their dikes, their contracts will be watertight.
Anything else on Brexit, chaps?
I'd like to mention my favourite author has gone and died. John le Carre.
Oh, right.
What huge writer.
Wait a minute. You read John le Carre, a known spy?
No spy. Andy taught at
A
Eton.
British spy. Did you not know that all his books are full of subliminal messages?
That's a no. Anyway, apparently he's so well respected by the staff, not necessarily the Hutcheons at our British intelligence services, that they the nicknames that he came up with in his books, they use them inside the intelligence services. So it's quite funny.
Oh, right.
His father was a famous con man.
Maybe that's why they chose him to be a spy.
He does over the years he's done a bit of an Alfred Hitchcock and turned up and done cameo parts in a lot of the movies that they've made of his stuff.
Right.
He's also a wonderful writer, and there was a great tribute. Robert Harris and Ian Rankin were on TV this morning, making doing an obituary for him. Great tributes to the man. A fabulous writer.
And unusually, most of the movies of his books have been very good as well.
The Night Manager was brilliant.
Yep, good. Shame he's gone.
Shame he's gone. There seem to be an awful lot. Maybe it's just, does it happen just because you get old? All these other, you keep seeing people dying, or is it because we're in the middle of a pandemic?
It's the British Secret Service using COVID as a cover. I'll send you the link, Stuart.
Okay, right. I'll read it.
Jimmy, anything you'd like to finish with?
No, really, mate. But just given that there's been so many mentions of Eton today, I'd like to just show people where I'm sitting today.
Oh, it must be Fettes. Oh, what a building!
Fettes.
Just outside Scotland's Eton, yeah.
Fettes.
Fettes.
Mm-hmm.
Tony
I love the
Blair's
building.
alma mater.
Exactly.
Right, Tony Blair. Yes. I like the building. I think it's very impressive. It looks very like a French chateau, doesn't it?
You could spend the week burling around the Edinburgh schools. You could nip up to Stumel and Harriet's and maybe
I could, but I'd probably get put on some kind of register, mate.
doing the muscle brush.
Hanging about school gates for hours on end. I'd really rather not.
You'd like to do that in a taxi.
I played rugby for Edinburgh Borders once at Loretto, and they've got the biggest drinks cupboard I've ever seen.
It's a collection of fabulous buildings, Loretto, actually. It's a really entertaining, really interesting.
Well, it was, this
played
cupboard was a gym
cricket.
cupboard.
Did you? I played cricket at Gordonston once, and we actually drew.
I hope you took your bat to the... Oh, I see Charles is reconsidering his plans to travel to Scotland.
Oh, well, that came up at the presser.
I'm quite pleased about that, but I'd also like to question, or not question, but posit a rather nasty rumour. Why not? Do you think the royal family are falling apart? Why on earth was Charles coming to Scotland for Christmas? They always go to Sandringham. Always.
Oh, has the Queen not changed her plans? Has she not stayed in a cupboard under the stairs this year?
I think Betty just can't stand the sight of Camilla, mate, and they're all falling apart. With a bit of luck, we could have a revolution next year, and maybe the French had the right idea. Stuart, you still got the plans for that guillotine, haven't you?
Oh, I've got it's the Scottish version. It's called the Maiden.
Barry, that'll do it, as long as it works, mate.
Okie doke, guys. We'll call it a day at that. Happy Monday. We'll see you all tomorrow. Thanks for coming on, Jimmy.
No worries, mate.
Good to see you. And Stuart.
Bye-bye.
And I'm Norrie, and we'll see you tomorrow, folks. Thanks for listening. Cheers for now.